The Instigators is a brand new movie on Apple TV Plus. It's directed by Doug Liman. It stars Matt Damon and Casey Affleck alongside what is quite possibly every great character actor in Hollywood. Hong Chow, Michael Stuhlbarg, Paul Walter Hauser, Ving Rhames, Toby Jones, Alfred Molina, and Ron fucking Perlman. I went into this movie blind, Bahir. I don't think I even saw a trailer. And I was surprised every time one of those people showed up on screen.
You missed out one name which means nothing to you but means a lot to me. Rob Gronkowski.
Oh, as in the NFL player.
The Gronk. Yeah, he was the guy that was hyping up the crowd at the political event. He was playing himself.
Right.
The Gronk is himself.
So I went into this completely blind. I'm glad there is a space for movies like this. And when I say movies like this, it is a heist comedy in the vein of the Coen brothers that we don't actually see anymore. Not just because the Coen brothers aren't making these kinds of movies, but also because it feels like studios aren't greenlighting these movies. And yet, here comes The Instigators, which is this crazy, surreal, small, intimate heist comedy about these two guys on the run after a heist fucks up right royally. And the whole movie is kind of built around their character, their banter, and their relationship. The heist almost doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The implications of that are irrelevant. But what you're here for is Matt Damon and Casey Affleck doing their thing alongside Hong Chow. Like, that's what you're here to watch. And it's incredibly entertaining, made even more so by the presence of Doug Liman, who knows how to infuse action into the situation as well. This was a movie that took me by surprise. It was completely unexpected, and I had a fantastic time. I didn't know what to expect, and I genuinely didn't think I was going to enjoy it this much.
The term heist comedy promises a lot, and I think Doug Liman, with a script written by Casey Affleck, by the way, really delivers. I wish I could have seen this in the cinema, but I also understand why this isn't in the cinema.
Not in 2024, right?
Not in 2024. I think this kind of movie will just die a quick death in the cinema, which I think is unfortunate because this was a really fun movie.
That's it. It's got a limited theatrical release, but just in the US.
I was genuinely very surprised at how much I enjoyed this. I was going to do the millennial thing by putting it on while I was doing other work, but I ended up not doing any work and just watching this thing because Casey Affleck and Matt Damon are beautiful together. Them playing Bostonites, just ripping each other apart, fast lines back and forth, was beautiful. It was music. Their dialogue, their fights in the car reminded me a lot of like the pace of an Aaron Sorkin thing, where it's not speaking for speaking's sake. There are things being said there. There are important things to be paying attention to. The way Casey Affleck's character would sort of poke at Hong Chow, their psychiatrist, and it was all really, really well done. I loved how everybody knew who Ving Rhames' Frank Toomey was. You see the car, you're like, shit, it's fucking Toomey. I loved Alfred Molina in this. I thought Toby Jones was great. There was so much good in this movie. And I loved how everybody just does their thing and leave the scene. Paul Walter Hauser is in it very little, but I cannot not remember Paul Walter Hauser in this movie.
I mean, that's precisely right. Everyone we've mentioned doesn't have particularly large roles, with the exception of Matt Damon, Casey Affleck, and Hong Chow. The movie kind of centers around those three characters. Stuhlbarg, Paul Walter Hauser, Ving Rhames, Alfred Molina, Toby Jones, Ron Perlman. They're all side parts, almost cameo roles, because they're supporting. And yet, each and every one of them is completely memorable.
Yeah.
Ron Perlman plays this corrupt politician, and he is absolutely fantastic every time he's on screen.
Yeah.
And I think that takes some tremendous performances, but also tremendous writing in actually giving those characters enough to do that they aren't just bit parts in this movie that's centered around three major actors.
But I think it's also just the confidence in the writing, right? Because yes, Ron Perlman's character is nothing more than a cameo appearance. However, the writing gives him enough to not just be a memorable character, but have it be a reason for it to be Ron Perlman.
Correct.
The Alfred Molina character, the Toby Jones character. Yes, you could have just called central casting and just gotten a up and coming actor to just fill that role. It would have been fine. However, why be fine when you can get Michael Stuhlbarg? It's not even the kind of thing where it was written for cameo roles. These characters are important characters to the movie. Stuhlbarg, Molina, even Jack Harlow Scalvo. You need those characters. You need those people to move the story along. However, if you can get someone like Jack Harlow or Alfred Molina, then why not?
So the movie kind of centers around a very unplanned heist. It's election night, mayoral elections. Essentially, a group of people want to steal money, rob the safe of a very corrupt politician. They figure there is no way he's going to lose. And when he wins, what happens all the time is the tributes begin pouring in. So on election night, suddenly there will be an influx of cash and he will be flush, and they plan to raid the safe at this time. That's the beginning of the movie. The heist takes place within the first 15 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
Everything goes to shit, and the rest of the movie is essentially Matt Damon and Casey Affleck, who are two of the people involved in the heist, on the run. Well, not quite on the run. There's a bit of a twist there, but we won't spoil it. And so that's essentially the whole film. And I make the Coen brothers comparison because a lot of the Coens heist comedies have a similar trope or a similar starting point. And most of the time you watch those because you're in it for the characters. And it's very clear where Casey Affleck has taken his inspiration. And I have to say, sometimes these things work better than others. Do you remember that George Clooney directed movie Suburbicon we watched a few years ago?
Yeah.
And that felt like a rejected Coen Brothers movie. It felt like it was trying to be Coen Brothers, but not quite hitting it. And I think the difference is that here they got Doug Liman. Now, Doug Liman, director of Swingers, Go, he reunites with Matt Damon because he directed him in The Bourne Identity in 2002. He also did Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Jumper, Edge of Tomorrow, American Made, most recently Roadhouse with Jake Gyllenhaal. And the great thing about Doug Liman, if you go through his filmography, yes, he's done a bunch of varied work, sci-fi, action, comedy, but if you look at Mr. and Mrs. Smith, if you look at something like even American Made with Tom Cruise, there is a balance of comedy that he can bring to the proceedings.
I almost feel loath to call this an action comedy because an action comedy makes you think of...
It makes you think of Rush Hour, but this isn't that.
Rush Hour, yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, that's an action comedy, whereas this just feels like a light action movie. Like Casey Affleck's trying to do to Matt Damon throughout the entire film, trying to make him laugh. And I don't think I laughed out loud in this film, but I had so much fun, right? So I wasn't guffawing along the floor.
No.
But it is a well-made film, very entertaining, very easy on the eyes.
I think all of the elements in this movie are handled in equal measure. So nothing is half-assed. The banter works, the comedy works, but when Doug Liman decides to do action, there are 2 car chase sequences in this film.
Oof.
And both of them are straight out of an action film. Like they are proper fucking car chases.
Yeah.
And of course, the car chase is not important, right? It's what's going on in the car and the conversation they're having. And so there's focus on that. And the way he shoots that is incredible. But then he doesn't shortchange you on the action sequence as well.
Yes, exactly. I think that first car chase sequence is, for what it is, like it's not Mission Impossible dramatic, but it works so well in this. And I think even in that chase, there's a funny escalation that Doug Liman nods to, that if you're not paying attention, you will miss it. It's this whole thing about Casey Affleck pointing out like, oh, they've got the National Guard. Oh, they've got the Rhode Island police are here. Because at the end, the park services are there.
Yeah.
It's just this thing of like, this corrupt mayor has called in all of his favors and called in all of the military forces that he can get his hands on, right? Anybody who is under the purview of the government and has a gun, call them up, which is why the park services are there. And I thought that little nod is hilarious. It's a funny nod made in a car chase, in a standoff in an office block. It's beautiful.
The thing I enjoyed most about the film was the relationship between Matt Damon, Casey Affleck, and Hong Chow. Now, it goes without saying, Matt Damon and Casey Affleck have known each other from the time they were kids. And so it feels like that chemistry is natural because it probably is. They're buddies in real life. And so any kind of banter that we see on screen is probably as real as it gets. But then when you throw in Hong Chow, who is also reuniting with Matt Damon, I think 7 years after downsizing,
Yeah.
yet again, she brings a new dynamic to it, and the three of them seem to work seamlessly together.
And the dynamic isn't just the straight man, loose man, right? Like
No,
Casey Affleck is the motor mouth, but Matt Damon isn't the angry other guy either. I love that Hong Chow's straight person role in that trio. It isn't jarring. She's bouncing off of Casey Affleck very, very well.
I highly recommend it. It's been
Yeah.
a long time since I've seen a movie like this, and I wish people made more movies like this because when you think back, the Coen brothers never made big movies. They were small movies like this that would play in cinemas. People would go and watch them. They would be critically acclaimed. Some of them may get nominated for Oscars, but we would get at least one a year or one every 2 years. And I don't think people make these sorts of movies anymore. The kind we get, the heist comedy type stuff we get, end up being the subpar, mediocre budget stuff that's badly written on Netflix.
There is no middle ground anymore.
Where do you place something like this, right?
Yeah, like in a cinema theatrical release, how much money do you put marketing this thing? Because Matt Damon, Casey Affleck, and the 37 other big names in this thing, you can't stick them all in a poster. You can't give them all character trailers. You know what I mean? So I think even as a studio, it's hard to market this film because the young kids won't go for this because other than Jack Harlow, I don't know if they know much of, Toby Jones, for that matter, Alfred Molina.
No, you're right. This movie appeals to a very specific demographic, and a lot of it would be 40-year-olds and above who grew up watching Coen Brothers movies and loving Coen Brothers movies.
Also, I think this film will not do well for an audience that isn't expecting it. In the sense that if you watch the trailer and you see there's this big car chase, all the other sequences, the action sequences in inverted commas in the trailer happens within the first 15 minutes. And then it's just a lot of them trying to evade the cops, trying to get to know each other in dialogue
In very funny ways.
in very funny ways. It's a character movie, and I feel like audiences nowadays are not expecting a character movie in the cinema, and I think that's unfortunate.
That's it. We all get to watch it on Apple TV Plus, which is wonderful. And we think you should check out The Instigators, especially if, like us, you are a fan of this sort of movie, this genre of film. This one drops on the service this Friday. That's The Instigators on Apple TV Plus. Watch it. Let us know what you think. You know how to reach out. Goggler MY, all of our social media feeds. You can also email us on podcast@goggler.my or send us a WhatsApp on the Goggler hotline, 012-524-5208. Thank you so much for listening. This is the Goggler Podcast.